Okay. Work in progress day number 2 for this. Not sure this is going to work. I need to do a little bit. Why are the planes, though? I have to schedule things with planes. Decide to. Yes, I'm about to start this event. So, one of the other things is I'm trying this simulcasting on Discord. So, I'm trying to get the Discord up and running. And we'll see how that works. Okay. Ooh, wait, I am. It has my thing rotated though on Discord. Can I not do that? Or is that just showing it to me? Well, hopefully it's not rotating. If I'm gonna show up backwards on Discord, that would not be great. What is that? Yeah, share my screen? No. I don't want to leave the stage. All right, we'll see. We'll see how this goes. Hopefully it's not showing backwards for other people if they're in here. Methinks I'm muted. Oh, I am muted. Thanks, Ian. This is on Discord. Yes, all right. I'm just going to be working this out. Ian, am I backward? Is the video backwards from your perspective, or is it just backwards from my perspective in Discord? Okay, flipping me locally. That's fine, because I don't need to look at myself. I just need to know I'm there. Great. Excellent. Day 2, just a little aside before I get into it. And not that I didn't feel free to do this before, but I suppose the fact that this is kind of unlisted means that I can be a little bit more free with this. I've been thinking about, so yesterday went okay, but one of the things I realized yesterday, and actually what I think I'm going to do, I think I'm going to make it a second channel just so I can talk about kind of behind the scenes stuff so that I don't muck up streams and stuff here. So you'll probably see that come from me. And then if you're interested in hearing me go on and talk about stuff behind the scenes, then I'll have that kind of a separate area. But just quickly, the thing that occurred to me yesterday is, okay, I've got this unlisted stream and I'm going to set up this notification. And I already know that I think the community notifications, not that they're borked, but the thing with the bell, and I don't even know, there's not a lot of visibility in terms of YouTube. And if I put a community post and how do you get notified? When do you get notified? All that stuff. The other thing that occurred to me is that because it's unlisted, I don't think folks see, there's no indication that I'm online when I'm online. So if you missed that initial announcement or it is slow, you're not going to catch up to it maybe till eons later. This is why I thought, well, I've got Twitch, but my experience with Twitch is that nobody, for whatever reason, you folks, the folks who are kind of following me, don't tend to be on Twitch. But I wanted to make sure because I thought, what, Twitch is kind of, if I revisit the Twitch angle and say, hey, let me do what a lot of folks do and stream to Twitch, which can be messy and long and all that stuff, and then go to YouTube, maybe that would work. But as I suspected, and when I put up the poll, most of you folks aren't on Twitch all that much. That brought me around to kind of doing the Discords. Ian gets ads on Twitch. Yeah, there's that too. Right? I mean, everything's gonna have a back, some kind of issue attached to it, right? So I thought, well, then there's Discord, and maybe it's a way to kind of build folks, get people interacting here on the Discord. We have a few people that talk pretty regularly, but there's not really wide. I haven't gotten to that tipping point where I've got people talking. Maybe this is a way to get Discord. If you're on the Discord, you might happen to come on. I can notify on Discord. You'll see that I'm on here on Discord. So it might be that reminder. If you catch it 5-10 minutes late, you'll still see. So I'm trying this thing. I don't really know if folks do that. Discord, the problem with Discord is that there's no way to record through Discord. The ability to do things on Discord, actually Discord has some nice stuff, but there's no way to really record it. So what I have to do is I kind of figured it out a way I could basically split my video stream to send one into YouTube, send one to Discord. Audio, I guess they don't care. You can split audio all you like, but video, you have to kind of go through a couple of hoops. So we're going to see how this goes. And we'll just take it from there, right? Everything's a work in progress, particularly this week and into beyond as I get kind of settled in. Now, on to the show. So with that preamble out of the way, on to the show. one thing well, let's see, it was a couple of weeks ago now that we looked at that flux space idea, which we had looked at kind of in the far reaches of the past if you were around at that time. And there's something that I've appreciated about that, which is the way that they kind of categorize going through a hex in terms of discovering locations. You have a number of locations in a particular hex, and then you sort of go through them, and you have two levels. One is sort of a top level, and then there's I think they call it shallow. In their case, they call it shallow and deep, and they're not. Their system is kind of more generic. It's not necessarily for hexcrawls. It could be for many things, but they have the idea of shallow locations, and I think that's the terminology they use, and then deep locations. If you're in an area in this kind of flux space, you haven't fully explored. You haven't fully, and I don't know if mapped is even the right word. You haven't fully explored that space until you've found all the shallow locations and then the deep locations. And then the other part of it is you can't find, you have to find the shallow ones before you'll find the deep ones. So you can't go straight to the deep nodes and say, oh, okay, I found this deep spot. Let's go. Oh, and why is my chair is creaking? You can't do that. So it gives you this idea of, okay, you have to experience at least so many. I should probably see if I can pull up that Flux Space article again. I don't know if do I have it? Flux Space Design TTRPG. Will that do it? Will I get that? Oh, I think I can actually get there, right? Because this is where I got to it the last time. And then it came here. All right, so we can get to it. So let's see. Okay, depleting resources, resolve events. That's fine. Just really just the construction of a flux. Yada, yada. All right, where did I just totally scroll past? They call them points of interest. Each flux has two sets of points of interest, shallow rooms and deep rooms at the end of each charting action after the event dice. So all the referee rolls on the table. Yes, Ian, I made you a moderator on here because you were a moderator otherwise. If you do not wish to have that power, I can remove it from you. But yes, you have great power, and with that comes great responsibility. I was aware. If you're uncomfortable with it, I can remove it, but I was aware. Just because you had it in other areas, I figured I would give it to you here as well. Okay, so we have shallow rooms, deep rooms. You're charting. As the referee will point to one of the rooms. So you basically have to. I think you start encountering deep rooms after you've at least found some shallow rooms, but you can't fully have mapped out an area until you've discovered all of them, right? So what the heck does that have to do with the price of tea at your local supermarket? And let me take a sip of. I'm trying something a little different. This is orange vanilla from Polar, orange vanilla seltzer. It's kind of it's got a little creamsicle vibe to it. So there are two angles here. So I've seen it and I've used it myself, having different ideas of kind of shallow and deep, or we could use landmarks and secrets. There are a bunch of ways to do that. But as I was thinking about this article again, it got me thinking about, okay, how can we utilize a concept similar to this, or riff off of that, or whatever, to help us with hex crawling stuff? Well, there's a couple of things. I mentioned this on the stream yesterday. If you happen to tune in at some point to the 3-hour stream on the Isle, the idea of, okay, you've got something in a hex, and isn't it kind of funny that you found this one thing? Does that ruin for you, either the GM or the player, the idea of the verisimilitude that there's 30 some odd square miles and I found this thing, right? That the one thing that's here and I happen to find it. And then, does that make sense? Okay, I don't tend to mind it. I know a lot of folks don't mind it, but some people, it just rubs them the wrong way, right? Why is there just one thing in here to find? And of course I stumble on it right away. Well, this concept of the deeps and the shallows, if you want to use their terminology, or something else, does speak to a way to handle that, which is to have a number of things, and then if you have something that is either it's unusual or you want it to be more of a secret, that it's sort of buried, right? And so the party's not going to find necessarily one thing. There might be four, five, or six things to find, and then they have to find some of those obvious things, and then some of the things. So if there's literally a fish, a magic fish made of gold that's in a tiny pond, then the odds are you're not going to find that, or maybe it's impossible for you to find that on just your first way through. Instead of in some systems where that would be just the one thing. If I were to let's make a sample hex, right? Just sample hex, a magic fish of solid gold swims circles in a secluded pool. Okay, so if that's our sample hex, and you say, "Hey, man, I'm not digging that. Why? How do they find some secluded pool on their first way through it?" Right? Okay, so we can now, using a similar concept, we can differentiate between obvious things, which we maybe call landmarks, to some unobvious things, which I don't know if you want to call it secrets, or we can come up with a term, whatever it is, or we can use shallow and deep kind of things. That, hey, okay, now this is a deep thing, right? They got to really, I want them to be digging around in here and show some verve, show some dedication before they end up seeing this. Okay, fine. But what that does is, and I'm gonna move over here to show the old Mool Forest and Aelgar, the Red Mountains. If you end up with a hex map that looks like this, as I'm showing here, you have a tremendous amount of area. And if you want to start populating this area with stuff, even if you pick a subset area, and you decide, well, I need to populate it, and because I want this, whether you want to call it verisimilitude, whether you want to call it diversity, whatever, however you specifically want to term it, by doing that, and again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a fine approach, but just understand what the task you are giving to yourself is going to be it's going to be a heavy one. You're going to have a lot of stuff here.
Heart to heart about our future.
You're going to have a lot of content to fill. And maybe that's a problem. Maybe it's not a problem. But I tend to think that for most people, it's probably a problem, right? Or at least it's daunting. It's an obstacle. It's an obstacle that is potentially going to derail somebody, because you've made this big hex map. Maybe not that big. This one's pretty. To me, this one, the one that I always use, is I think it's pretty ambitious, let's say. But a lot of folks might start with something smaller. But either way, you end up at the end of it and you go like, wow, that's a lot of room. That is a lot of room. And then, well, now you gotta fill all that. I'm just setting a little reminder here. Reminder that I'm live right now, just on the tubes here. Okay, there we go. So we've got this big area. We've decided we'd like this verisimilitude area. We've decided, or we want to have that. Oops, I'm moving the map, which I don't want to do. So something I've been thinking about is maybe we could do things and not just resolve everything on the hex level, a single hex. We can use larger areas. And if we use larger areas, the advantage we have is cutting down on that work. Well, if we're using a larger area, we don't have to. We go from, I don't know, however many hexes big some of these things are, and having to do one for every one, to saying, well, let's take a subset and we're going to kind of treat them as one. Treat them as one unit, at least for some stuff. So this is when I put in the title, I mentioned regions and areas. That's kind of where I'm getting at with regions and areas. That, you know, we've got, if we're putting our terminology, a region is made up of one or more connected and related areas. Well, I guess I'm doing this backwards. I should probably do. So first, a hex is a single unit of terrain and environment, right? An area is made up of two or more connected and related hexes. And then a region, so if I bold that, is it going to come across? This one thing with Ouija, this bold. I mean, look at that. How can you could barely see that thing's bold. Come on, Ouija, do better. So first off, let's define some terms. So if we're dealing with the hex as our single unit, abstract unit of terrain and environment. Doesn't have to all be one terrain, because if we look at one of these, mountain and woods, it's not all mountains, it's not all woods, it's not even all mountains and woods. It's mostly wooded mountains, but there's other stuff in there. But that's as drilled down as we're getting. Whatever our size, our hex is, that's as far as we're getting. Then we can look at an area and say, okay, now an area is going to be some collection of these, and it can be as big or as small as you want. I'm not trying to I am not trying to put some kind of hard numbers on it, but you're talking about an area, you just want more than one hex. Otherwise, you're just talking about a hex. So, okay, hexes. So some amount of hexes then makes an area, and then some amount of areas, two or more. I guess it could be one or more in case you could see, for example, maybe you look at that Elgar Mountains as one area, but I would probably want to split it up. The high Elgar, the low Elgar, the west, the east, whatever. Come up with some different things. So we'll just say two or more, I guess, because then it would, if it was just one, it would just be an area. But right, two or more connected and related areas. So we've got our terms here. Now, if we wanted to take this and then utilize something like that flux space kind of concept, this concept of, hey, I'm going to make a bunch of things, but I don't want to make a bunch of things. So let's go back to our sample here. If we were going to flux space this out, flux spatial sample hex. And I'm just going to use shallow or deep. Then we might have to say, shallow locations. I don't know the Goat's Head Hill. Let's just call it Goat's Head Hill. The River Schlepp. The pine forest, the pine wood. And then, well, let's just for our example, let's just leave it there. And then we have for our deep locations, we've got the pool of the goldfish. The pool of the goldfish. The owlbear lair. Let's see. Forgotten Dungeon of the Blackened Eye Cult. right? Sure, sure, sure. So if we were going to do our sample, now this is great. We could say that if we're rolling to use the flux kind of thing, we're rolling a d6. We can say that on a 1 to 2, you get the Goat's Head Hill. On a 3 to 4, you get the river. 5 to 6, Pinewood. And so each one of these is pretty major. The hill is pretty big. It's pretty obvious in the terrain. Something, if you're in that area, you're going to tend to run it. Same thing with the river. It's a pretty major river. You're going to run into it. Maybe it crosses. It'd be hard not to run into it as you're going through there. That's great. And then we can have similar things here, and we can even play if we wanted to. I suppose you could even play with the numbers. Though I'm not even sure that the flux gets in there. The problem is this is one hex, and this hex, wow, we got a lot of stuff going on here. But this is all one hex. Now I got to do another hex, and another hex, another hex. Well, how many hexes am I going to get through before? Yeah, maybe I've got some random generators that I can lean on that are gonna give me some stuff to fill it. But even then, oh hey Magnus, didn't notice. Even then, if you're going to use random generators, you still have to make sense of it all. You still have to put context in, unless you're going to go with, hey, all this stuff's kind of rando, and I don't know how this stuff connects together. That's fine too. But if not, you want to add some context, you want to make it sort of fit in some way. Well, that adds complexity too, even if you're using random stuff. And if you're not using random stuff, that's a lot of hexes, because now you go from doing however many hexes you have one thing, now you're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things. So that's tough. But now, what if we instead kind of took these kind of flux things and instead applied them to an area and said, okay, well let's have we're going to have an area here. Let's call this sample area. And we'll call it, I don't know, what do we got here? Let's call it, we'll just call it the Western Mool Forest, right? Mool Forest, the Western Mool Forest. That's what we got here. I'm not going to, and let's just say we'll call it 6 hexes. 6 hexes of forest and mixed forest hills. This is just for our reference, right? That's just for our reference. So now we've got, okay, so now we got this area. This area is 6 hexes, but what we're not going to do is we're not going to do this for a list of 6 for everything. But what we could do is we can treat these as applying to hexes in here. And 6, I would probably say, well, you want one location, at least one per hex. You could probably have 2. Your size of your hexes can factor in here. If they're really small hexes, you might say, oh yeah, just one feature of some kind. If I'm using 1 mile hexes, then maybe for real sort of features, not real, but considerable features, important features, yeah, maybe there's just one. If I'm using 6 mile hexes, maybe I have some other number, in which case I can change my lists up, or I can reduce my areas, whatever to use, die type, whatever. So you can really tweak these and into whatever permutations you want that match. But essentially, we can say a rule, and this would apply to everything, but I'm just going to apply it here. We can have kind of a generic rule that, hey, when the party explores a hex of WMF, roll on the locations table. And so now, right, so the first time they enter in a hex and they explore it, or maybe not even explore it, depending how you want to work it, if you want to say that they could find it on a navigation point or if it has to be explored to see it. So now when they go in, you're going to roll on the locations table, and then essentially that flux system can kind of work as intended. But instead of having to do however many things for a single hex, or I guess they call it room, you're treating this area as the room, and you're dividing up this content inside here. But there's an advantage, I think. I think there's an advantage. The advantage is that you get to there's a, what's the word I'm looking for? Okay, so if there's a power or a thing that's nice about the flux mode, right, where you interact with shallow locations, as you cross off shallow locations, that you get the ability to get deep locations. But you can't end around here. You have to at least find one of these, a shallow location, and then you start getting deep locations. When you've gotten everything, God, my chair's creaking today, sorry about that. When you've gotten everything down, then you're done. This gives you the ability to kind of tell a story. You don't have absolute control. It's not a railroad. It's not like, hey, you're going to encounter one, the story isn't you're going to go to Goat's Head Hill, then you're going to find the river, then you're going to get to the Pinewood, and then you're going to find the Owlbear Lair, then you're going to find the dungeon, then you're going to find the pool of goldfish. In that order, absolutely. No, it's not. But you're still getting a chance to kind of tell a story because you get to one of these places first. Then as the party delves deeper in or along the edges or whatnot, then suddenly they get to one of these other locations, and you get to kind of tell a story a bit about, okay, well, they made it to Goat's Head Hill, and they're interesting, and then they kept going, and then, it just so happens that they rolled the pool of the goldfish. So now you get to have that, and you get to kind of tie them together in sort of a meaningful way because they visited sort of in this order, and you can connect these together, right? These I just made randomly, but if we were in let's just do one, right? If we have a story to tell about the Mole Forest, we could have something. Let's just say it's like a Mirkwood type place that we're basically thieving Mirkwood from the Hobbit. So we want sort of mean elves. So we're gonna have kind of three different things going on here: some ornery elves, unfriendly elves, murderous giant spiders, and then finally the necromancers. We'll put the orcs aside, and then the necromancers, and necromancers' lair. So in the shallow locations, we can have the elf trail. We can have the let's see, the forest. I'm just calling it the Forest of Webs. We can have maybe there's a desiccated. Did I spell desiccated wrong? What did I do? The desiccated elk corpse. The there's the elf feast trap. We got let's say the spider. Giant spider. Elf trail, forest of webs. This way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One more. Oh, I don't know. Let's call it the forgetful stream. So now we have these 6 shallow locations, and each of these locations help tell a story about what's going on in the Western Mole Forest. They each allow us to interact with it. The fun thing for players, certainly the fun thing for me, is we don't know which one of these we're going to get. Maybe if they continue to drill into the forest, they continue to kind of explore, they'll eventually they'll run into all of them, but they might not straight ahead. And depending on what they do, might lead them. I would definitely be one to say, hey, the elf trail, if they follow it right, will leads to maybe it leads to the feast trap. Maybe. Or we could say it leads. Well, let's make the deep. So let's make the deep location. So we got those. Now we can go into the deep locations. We've got the spiders. The spider. I don't know. I don't know what do you call? I mean, I know they're webs, but I guess the spider home webs. Well, I don't know. We've got the hidden door to the elf underground elf domain. We've got the necromancer's tower. I'm not sure. Maybe we could come up with some more, but that's it, right? We just to get an idea. So we've got this story that we can kind of build around here. Now, the nice thing is for us in terms of prepping our hex crawl is we did this bit of work, and depending on your prep, you might you drill down into these. You can write more about them or not, or just look and say, oh yeah, there's an elf trap, right? Leads to the feast trap. The feast trap probably has hidden path to elf door. We could connect some of these to, and I think we can connect some of these so that if you get to the feast trap and you're not captured like they were in the Hobbit, but you evade it or you get there, some other thing happens. Maybe there's a more hidden trail that leads to the elf door, to the door to the underground elf domain. We can make these kind of connections, but I guess my point is with this is that I think we get kind of the best of both worlds. You get this idea of, hey, things aren't written in stone. We're not saying that the party must find this one location in a bunch of wilderness, but we're also saying, to me, at least making a practical. We're staying practical by saying, listen, I can't. Maybe over time, no, absolutely over time, you can of course keep adding to your hexes, but I need something I'm running right now. And this is a way for me to kind of to do things which we do in life already. We talk about woods, right? We don't remember hexes are just an abstraction. They're to measure stuff. When we talk about what's happening in Sherwood Forest, we're not dividing it up into hexes. It's the forest has stuff in it. And there's, if we look at it and say like, hey, this forest, in our case, the Western Mule Forest, there's almost a fog of war, a fog of exploration. It hasn't happened in here. And so we all get to discover what's in here. We know as the GM, we've decided ultimately these are the things in here. But we get to tell this kind of story of, oh, you're running into this, you're running into that. And it's telling the story of the Necromancer's Tower and the spider home webs and whatever. And I'm assuming in this case, the Necromancer and the spiders are connected. We could sort of make those connections. We could do that in a way that is leveraging a few hexes instead of one, but it has a unity of place, not just one hex, but it's this part of the forest. And we always name these things and we do that. So we're connecting it all together. And we're not killing ourselves and having to prep a ton of hexes. We're able to kind of look at it as a whole and say, hey, when you first enter a hex, maybe you're going to find one of these shallow locations. As you keep searching, you're going to find something. And then if you keep searching, and then if you're really, this is a system and you can add XP rewards to this. You can figure out what kind of things to motivate. Hey, you're going to keep going through. Then, yeah, man, you were going to find everything. Then, you can get rewarded. And now you have essentially explored this area. And I hope I'm making sense. Let me know if I'm not. Let me know if I'm not making sense. I still want to come up. I like the kind of idea of shallow and deep, because I was kind of when I was trying to title this, I was thinking like delve, because the idea of you're kind of going down into something, you're exploring it, but I feel like delve hits too much the more about dungeon crawling, dungeon delving than the wilderness. But the idea of you're digging in, you're heading into the heart, you're heading into the heart of this thing. I think we get caught up on oftentimes maybe too much on the hex as a unit that must have X amount of features and X amount of stuff and this or that or the other. But the hexes are just tools to help us. And I think it's probably I think it's probably more helpful to think of these areas, and we do because we name them and things, but then we decide that basically each hex we have to handle almost separately. Like each and we kind of have to deal with them where I guess my thing here is let's kind of deal with them as a whole, maybe break it down. I mean, this map, this map which I often use is really great for illustrating some issues, but it's not great for this because they just have huge, these areas or regions, maybe called Mole Forest, this huge region. The Red Mountains is a huge region. The Wilds is this big region, or maybe the Wilds just an area. I don't even think there's really much differentiation in there. But we could take these areas. And you can play with wide areas. I would think for a wide open, if this is truly just wide open kind of grasslands, then maybe you say, you know what, I'm not going to have one feature per hex because there's just nothing there, or there's desert, and I want to play with that wide openness. You still get to that sort of wide open emptiness of it. You still get to have all your things here. Now you're just going to spread them around. Maybe you say, hey, instead of for every one hex you explore, now you got to explore 3 hexes, and then there's one inside those 3. Nothing, then 1, something like that. We can, once we kind of, I think we come up with some rules and some things to put on it, then you can, once we come up with some rules, then we can start to manipulate those rules for different things. I myself I'm really agnostic on, I don't really care. I have no stake in some of these questions. The only thing that my goal is that I want to be able to make a meaningful play area, meaningful space to explore, and not kill myself trying to prep it. Magnus says, I try to think of region level encounters when I make my encounter table. So, for example, almost all my tables have a patrol option, which might have a D4 subtable of active local forces. Yeah, you could totally do it. Now that would be, that's another lever to pull, right? The wandering creatures, that to me is separate from this. This is just literally locations, and at these locations you could roll for a wandering creatures. But yes, I think encounters, in regional encounter tables is absolutely another thing to do, which we can just, why not? Well, let's just go. Let's just add that in the mix, right? So that we can. So we've been talking about stocking. Oops, let me just make a thing here. So we're gonna, whoops. What did I do? Yeah, I did that. I accidentally nested 2. So we're talking about stocking the wilds. Use areas and regions to stock numbers of hexes with interrelated content. I spelled interrelated wrong. 2 R's. Why do you do that? It's weird. It shows me the typo, then I click on it, and it doesn't correct it. It's weird. Magnus says that one could also have a wandering boss per X size area. So in Dark Forest, you always have a chance of encountering Aragog, Hagrid's pet spider. And then roll to see. Yeah, that's true. You could do a bunch of stuff. So we can use, for stocking, we can use areas and regions to stock numbers of hexes with interrelated content. We can gate content to being initially available or requiring dedicated search efforts to uncover. Initially available, right? That would be the shallow. That would be what they're calling deep. And then if we want to look at creatures, wandering creatures, Magnus says, addendum to the patrol thing, which I haven't been able to experiment with yet, but I like the idea of anchoring patrols to strongholds so they only patrol up to a certain number of hexes from the base. Yeah, you can do that. Wolves Upon the Coast does something like that. Let me see if I can find. Hold on, let me see if I can find it quickly because they do something similar in which his wandering creature table has. Hold on a minute. Let me just grab it. It has. Hold on a minute. I picked up. Oh, you know what? That's why I'm not at the beginning. I'm at the. Woo. So there we go. So he uses Luke Gehring in Wolves Upon the Coast uses something like this. So you'd roll for an encounter, and then you'd have a note saying, "Hey, if you're within 2 hexes of 1505, there are that many. There are this thing happens." There are a couple ways you can do that. He's doing basically what we're talking about here, where he's got a region, Black Strath, and in that region, these encounters apply, and then he's differentiating with using this. You could do it that way, or you could split the Black Strath into an area, and you could have something. Let's just mock it up real quick. Let's just say we wanted to have we can leverage regions and areas to nest encounters. So, for example, let's just say we've got a 2d6. Let's make an example, right? Let's make an example here. Wandering creature table example. So we use something roll 2d6. And then we say, all right, on a 2 to 3. Or actually, let's do it this way. No, sorry. We'll do it as this. Sorry, we'll do it as this. Roll d66. And then we could say, basically, from 11 to, let's call it 46, those are regional encounters. And then 56 to 66 are area encounters. Or maybe you say, I don't know, 36, none, 36 to 46. So that way you can have, and what you can even do is something like this, regional encounters, if any, otherwise pick regional encounter, so that if you, let's say you roll a 61, you roll a 61, you might have a regional encounter table that has this, you might say, okay, hey, if there's an area encounter, we pick that instead. But if we're somewhere that's in the region, but maybe not, that doesn't have an area encounters, we haven't just gotten to it, we don't have one, then we can use the region one. So you could, we could make up some rules. Again, it's about making rules to say, okay, we can nest these things up. We can nest these together, and we can leverage these things. So now we can have, and none of, and whereas an area, basically we can have a single hex can have all this stuff too. That's the other thing we could do. We could even have all 3 levels in here. We could have 56 to, or let's say call it, and I'm calling it 51. This should really be 41. 6, and then we could have 61 to 66. Pick hex encounter. If any, otherwise area or regional, right? So you can have this generic system. We're going to roll. We're going to have, and so our regional encounter table would have from 41 to 66. Our area encounter table would have from 51 to 66. And then maybe our hex encounter would be 61, 66, if we have one. But they kind of they overlap in a sense. So you go, okay, no encounter, great. Oh, okay, we got a regional encounter. We roll on that. Oh, we got the area encounter. Well, let's check. Oh, does this area have an encounter table? Yes, if it does, we'll use that number. Same number, you're just using it now over there. Otherwise, okay, no, we're going to pick whatever. And of course, you can, if you want to flip these numbers, so you're most likely to get the hex. And then with area, I mean, that probably makes more sense that the hex, with where you are, you probably want specificity to count more. In this case, I've split them all up, right? 50 chance there's nothing, but maybe we're using another roll for that, or whatever. You could come up with however you want to figure that out. But the idea here is you can nest these levels, like, okay, inside, inside, inside. Magnus asks, what's the difference between an area and a hex? An area is at least 2 hexes. I did this up front, but you might have missed it. Our definitions: a hex is our single abstract unit of terrain environment. An area is made up of 2 or more connected and related hexes. A region is made up of 2 or more connected and related areas. I don't want to put any hard numbers. I'm not going to go hex flower or whatever, because it doesn't make sense. Our terrains don't look like that. Who knows how shaped your thing is. So it's just 2 or more. So if you have a large area, you can make them as big as you want. If you have a small area, you can make them as small as you want. But obviously, if your area is just a hex, then you might as well call it a hex. If your region is just one area, then it's just an area kind of thing. But it's basically so we can have these kinds of nestings. You could say that the region is your entire space. I wouldn't necessarily do that with. I would have probably this map here as a collection of regions. But you could say, hey, this is our region. Then the areas are these ones that are named inside there. And we do have some that don't necessarily have. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be. Maybe that would say it's part of the mountains. In any case, and then hex inside. But I would probably say, hey, the red mountains is a region. Then we might have some areas. Cut this up. Those would be areas, and then individual hexes within within that area. Ooh. So basically, the bottom line is to try to categorically and, in a sense, programmatically use those things that we do anyway. When we create maps, we don't tend to just create a bunch of hexes that we group them together. We coming over to look at Middle Earth map, obviously. We got all these kind of named locations, and what I'm thinking about is, okay, how can we sort of systematically utilize those for kind of the best bang for your buck with your prep. And certainly, if you have time to sit and do something like this, if you're not, I mean, this course is if you're not satisfied with having a single thing in a single location, right? If we go looking here in Wolves Upon the Coast, pick somewhere, or we're in a, we're kind of in a dungeon sort of thing, but you've got, I'm just trying to pick some of the simpler ones, right? Okay, crabs. Thousands of crabs in a small set of rock pools. They move in circles, dancing, locking claws with one another. If disturbed, they all scuttle into the ocean. That's it. And this is why I think a 6 mile hex, I'm guessing, on the coast, and this is totally fine. And there's absolutely, and I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from saying, hey, I'm fine with the kind of old school, if you want to call it that, just sort of standard. There is a thing in the hex, and when the first time you're in the hex, you hit the thing. Is it a little bit railroady? Kind of, just in the sense that you are pushing the party into a one encounter or situation when they enter a hex that is much bigger than that situation. Thousands of crabs in a small set of rock pools is not 30 square miles make. Okay, yes, it is saying you are coming to a specific spot and you're going to hit that spot. Now, the next time you come through, we'll have to roll, we'll have to figure out, we'll have to do something, or maybe just say it's empty, whatever, but it'll be maybe be more random or not. But that first time, you're hitting it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I do hear a lot of folks, and I think it's not necessarily a bad thing to say, no, and I want to try to go, I want to do more. I want to have more. And that's great. And you can do that, right? But how can we maybe do that without killing ourselves for stuff? I think by using some kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Using some categories, marking things off the way we do anyway, fictionally with our maps. We're gonna have these, at least the regions and probably areas already. Where are we playing this game? You're in the southern part of whatever. Bam, that's your region. Okay, we went into Mirkwood. Bam, that's your area. Or that could be the region. You could have areas within the region. You can set up however you want. But we already make these distinctions. So part of what I'm looking at is like, hey, can we mechanize the distinctions we're already making in a way to sort of ease our prep while giving us some neat things? I really like the idea of saying, hey, you gotta find some stuff. You're gonna find the stuff that's kind of on the outside or the easy to uncover stuff, and then you'll start to uncover these other things. And that's a great pattern for the party once they know. If they know this is something, then they encounter something. And then, okay, do we want to keep looking here? What's going on here? Let's go deeper. And they know that as they go deeper and deeper, they will be getting more to the heart of the matter, into the secrets of this location. That's great. And you get to have it be sort of random and dynamic because we don't know which part of the forest they're going to go to first. And then once they've seen it, then you can mark it down. Once they've seen the elf trail, you can say, yep, the elf trail is here. Yep, the forest of webs is here. We can put all those down on the map, and until they see it, then we get to have that same feeling of, hey, I'm not predetermining what they're going to see. I've just got my contents in here, and hey, they're going to see some things. And if you want to have this be 3 hexes and then have 2 locations per hex, you can do that too. I think part of why I'm setting it up this way is I think that starting off with kind of the story of this being sort of 1 spot per hex, I think is good enough. You can always improve on it. You can always do more later. You can come through, but doing this, just get 1. But we avoid a little bit that issue of we're predetermining it. What we're predetermining is that there's a story to this location. What is the story of Mirkwood? What is the story of the Western Wolf Forest? What is the story of this thing? And we can kind of build a web into there. Now, we don't have to. There could be places that, hey, just random stuff's happening. Yeah, there's a fox with 2 tails over here. There's a giant chipmunk that lives in a dead tree over here. And there's a witch who lives over there. Great. You can do that too. There's nothing preventing you. I kind of like the idea of the story aspect, but there's totally going to be times where it's not appropriate. Not every place has to have that. If some places just have stuff going on, some places are going to be fairly mundane. Yeah, there's a logging camp. Yeah, there's some old gypsy, or not gypsy is not the right word. Some old, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a, who's somebody lives by hermit, old hermit lives in a cave over by a stream, and yeah, there's nothing going on between the logging camp and the hermit. They just happen to be there, and that's that's great too. But you can use the same thing. You can add that more depth, maybe more of a narrative depth if you want. Almost, I think I'm almost more of like a mythic kind of. It adds that sort of storybook kind of fairy tale sort of thing when things have some relation to each other, which I like. I don't always love the tone of that, but I do like the kind of that we're in sort of a heightened space where things don't just kind of live next to each other with no that there is stuff going on, those kind of webs, and you can make those webs. We're not killing ourselves doing this. Okay, I got 6 hexes, so now I got to come up with 36 different things, 6 per hex, and do all that stuff. Like, no, I'm gonna still just come up with. I'm gonna have to come up with 6 things, but now I get to tell the story. But I'm telling it in a way that's not. It's not a road because who knows which things they'll get, and depending on how the party responds, they may never get to the depths of it. They may never get to the Necromancer's Tower because they end up in the underground elf domain, and then they end up hiding in barrels and floating down the river and ending up the Lonely Mountain, and they never find out that Sauron, or who would be the person who would later become Sauron, was just down the block. They'll never know. That's the story for a different adventuring party led by Gandalf the Grey and some other folks who go in and kick Sauron out of the Necromancer's Tower and send him running back to Barad-dûr in the land of Mordor. Though I guess according to the thing, I think that was kind of his plan. He was kind of ready to roll anyway. But nevertheless, and yes, to Magnus's point, you can do the same thing with your wandering creatures. We can leverage regions and areas. We can use nested lists. You could use something like Wolves on the Coast use, where they give you a big table, but then some things are only within certain spots. And then you could do that way too. Trying to get bang for the buck. And I also want to. I think the other thing is I want to encourage GMs and players alike really to embrace the exploration aspect. Embrace this concept of going in there. And then part of that embracing means from the GM is obviously if you want people to explore and you want to do that, I want to make it as easy as possible. I want it to be something you want to do because it's not super difficult, terrible, filled with frustration and pain and work that we don't have time for. And for the players, you want to reward it so that it's worthwhile for them to explore. If they're exploring, and there's nothing, then they're not going to want to. Then why are we going to do it? I think you can use XP stuff. You can use just the fact of, hey, if you want to get to the Necromancer's Tower, you're not going to find a map leading you right there. You're going to have to get into that spot, and you're going to have to dig around. But you as the party know you're going to do that. And the more you do it, the nice thing about this kind of system, this sort of flux system, is the more you're rolling on this table, or even if you don't know whatever's going on, the more you're rolling, you're increasing the odds of finding the thing you want to find. And I would also, like I said, I would add connections between these things so that it's not just, hey, you find an elf trail. It's, okay, now we want to follow the elf trail. Well, now we go, and we don't have to roll. Now we know, okay, it's going to get to this trap. If you can avoid the trap and you do some more searching around, well, you're going to get to the elf door, if that's what you wanted, right? So we can, I would definitely want to add some ways in here to bake in how you can shortcut and not just be like, I got to roll until we get lucky. It's like, no, you once you get in here, we're going to play out these things. That's what we're doing. We're going to play a role-playing game. So we're going to role-play out what happens when you get to that elf trail. And then depending on your decisions, that can help determine or mitigate what's happening next as you continue that exploration. How was that? Does that make sense? And like I said, I'm working on stuff, and this is all kind of feeding into that stuff. Working on stuff. But this idea of nesting levels of wilderness and sort of and utilizing them to kind of help stage our prep. This way you can sort of stage a whole area, and then as your game's going on, you could stage smaller pieces, or you could stage a region, let's say, then you can, all right, I've got that, and that's good to start. And then once you start zooming in, it's like, okay, wait a minute, they found this thing, and now I want to give it more importance, whatever, now I'm going to do the work. Right? See, to me, part of this idea of stacking these areas, or layering them, is that you can start your top layer, and you could make, okay, here's my regional wandering creature thing. Here's my regional locations of interest. All right, great. They're there. They're mucking around. Oh, okay. Now they've kind of got into something, now I can go into that next level and say, oh, okay, now they've gone from being in the Mool Forest to in the Western Mool Forest, and I'm thinking they're gonna be here for a while. Okay, now I'll do that part. Great. Now they've gotten to a smaller segment of that. Now I can drill down there. Finally, if there's a location that's very specific, now I can drill down into that specific hex and say, okay, now I'll do all this. They're going to be mecking around in the hex of, whichever hex in the Western Wheel Forest the Necromancer's Tower is, that's where they are. Great, now I can drill down into there. But I don't have to do it all at once. I can start at the top level and just do what I need for there, and then do what I need for the next one, do what I need for the next one, so on and so forth, down and down and down, and then be done. That's the goal. Let me know what you think in the comments. Also, if you let me know somewhere, wherever it is, if the community posts got to you, or how long it took to get to you, was that convenient? Remember, I've got sort of 3 ways that I'm going to be posting about these streams. I may change it up depending on how this kind of week goes, but the primary ones are going to be the community tab on YouTube, a members post on Patreon, though of course you can be a free member. You don't have to sign up and pay anything. It's just a matter of just becoming a free member. That way I put a members post up that does that. And also on Discord. Today I am streaming on Discord as well as on YouTube. I don't know who's on Discord. If anybody, I think Ian was on Discord before. I didn't get any complaints of lag, so presumably it's not lagging too bad. Everything's going okay. If that's good, that might be something I might just keep doing as a way for folks on Discord. So if you like Discord, if you prefer Discord to YouTube, you might want to try that. We'll see. It's a little bit of a pain to maintain, so I got to maintain kind of 2 chats and 2 things, and I don't know if it's a bandwidth killer. Today it worked okay. We'll see. Everything's going to be in kind of flux. But let me know how you're finding everything so I can kind of tweak things to do the best for everybody. Other than that, folks, have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on. I'll talk to you later. Thanks, Magnus. Bye.